Utah is turning into a desert, and it's happening way faster than anyone thought. In just a few decades, the state's most famous lake could dry up completely. And when that happens, huge clouds of toxic dust could cover entire cities, forcing millions of people to leave their homes for good. So, what is really going on? Utah is a western state in the US, and locals like to joke that it's already pretty much one big desert. And honestly, they're not that wrong. Most of the state is scorching hot and dry. In fact, Utah won the title of the second driest state in the entire country. But that only feels like a win if you actually enjoy temperatures of 101 degrees Fahrenheit. But when I say desert, don't picture endless sand dunes like the Sahara. Utah's deserts are more about canyons, rocky landscapes, and very scarce vegetation. And if you look at the state from above, a huge body of water immediately stands out. That's the Great Salt Lake, the largest saltwater lake in the entire Western Hemisphere. But soon, it might not even be a lake at all. Yep, this whole region is turning into a desert, no exception. That's a big deal because the Great Salt Lake isn't just any lake, it's essential for them. And there are three big reasons why. First, there's the cultural side. Long before any major cities ever showed up, it was already a place of deep spiritual meaning for indigenous tribes in Utah. Then there's the wildlife. This region is a crucial stop along the migration routes of about 10 million birds, including eared grebes and American avocets. For them, it's a place to feed, nest, and rest before continuing their journey. And finally, there's the economy. The Great Salt Lake is worth big money, bringing in about $1.3 billion a year for Utah. But its reach goes far beyond the United States and supports industries all over the world. This place is packed with brine shrimp, also known as sea monkeys. These tiny crustaceans are very important since they feed fish farms in dozens of countries. Believe it or not, almost half of the world's brine shrimp supply comes from the Great Salt Lake. But it's not just about these little creatures. This region also gives us magnesium, sea salt, and other minerals that keep Utah's economy running. It's such an important spot that it provides jobs for about 9,000 people. Now that you know how essential the Great Salt Lake is, here's the hard truth. It's drying up, fast. And there are two big culprits: the weather and, well, us. You see, the lake's been feeding the effects of shifting weather patterns. For a while now, more of the region's precipitation has been falling as rain instead of snow. And that's bad news. Snow is better for the lake because it piles up in the mountains and melts slowly, feeding the lake over time. But now, with less snow and more rain, the lake isn't getting refilled like it used to. And then there's the human factor. Starting back in the early 1900s, authorities began building dams, canals, and pipelines around the lake. The idea was simple: divert the lake's water to farms, factories, and the fast-growing towns nearby. People along the Wasatch Front have been actively diverting water from the lake for over a century. But in the last few decades, things have really ramped up. Think about it. Back in 1982, the Salt Lake City area had around 700,000 people. Fast forward to 2025 and it's about 1.2 million. That's a lot more showers, crops, and industry all pulling water away from the lake. And that brings us to where things stand today. Parts of the Great Salt Lake are now only about 40% full by volume. Sure, the water levels rise and fall from year to year, but overall, they've been dropping for decades. Back in the 1980s, the Great Salt Lake stretched over more than 3,000 square miles. By 2021, it barely covered 950 square miles. At this rate, the lake could disappear completely within just a few years. Pretty terrifying, huh? And the danger isn't just about the cultural history that could disappear, the millions of birds that could be lost, or Utah's economy taking a massive hit. The air itself could become harmful, turning this whole region into a dangerous place to live. Turns out, the sediments at the bottom of the Great Salt Lake are packed with materials that show high reactivity. In simple terms, stuff that could be bad, even toxic for us. When the lake shrinks, the exposed lakebed dries out and turns to dust, and that dust doesn't just stay put. It gets picked up by the wind and blown straight into the air. The problem is that the lake is pretty close to big cities, and the dust that could come from it might carry metals like manganese, iron, copper, and lead, all of which can seriously irritate your lungs. When that happens, it can trigger inflammation and lead to respiratory issues. Experts believe it might also be connected to heart problems, developmental defects, and other serious health risks. These findings were published in 2024. At the time, scientists admitted they couldn't yet confirm whether those toxic substances were reaching populated areas. They still needed better equipment to track the wind and all. Even so, people were already worried. Then, in May of 2025, the headlines hit. A dust storm carrying toxic elements had, in fact, swept across the Salt Lake Valley, impacting residents in some of Utah's most densely populated areas. People in Magna and Tooele County actually watched a massive plume of dust roll right over their cities. So yeah, even though we still need more studies to know just how bad things could get, or if the biggest cities will be hit, groups like the nonprofit Grow the Flow say the disaster is already underway. They report that dust storms from more than 1,000 square miles of exposed lakebed are already drifting into nearby communities, affecting the air people are breathing right now. This is just one reason why the situation is becoming such a big crisis, and why the authorities are so concerned. But it's not like there's nothing that can be done. People in Utah are already taking steps to turn things around, or at least keeping it from getting any worse. Over the past few years, Utah's authorities have made getting water back to the Great Salt Lake a top priority. They've done it by creating special policies for farmers and setting up new tools to track water flows, for example. They believe those efforts are starting to pay off. The lake hit a historic low in 2022, but the winters of 2023 and 2024 brought above-average snowfall. When that snow melted, the water ran into rivers and helped the lake rise a little. That's good news, but not great. I mean, the lake is still several feet below what's considered an ecologically healthy level. So, they had to come up with more ambitious plans. And recently, almost 23 billion gallons of water were sent from Utah Lake to the Great Salt Lake through the Jordan River. To put that into perspective, that's roughly 750 Olympic-sized swimming pools. It's enough water to supply about 3,000 homes for a year. The good news is that most of Utah's lake water comes from snowpack melt. And not long ago, it was nearly 96% full. So this plan is a real win-win. It helps keep the Great Salt Lake at a healthier level, and it also helps prevent flooding at Utah Lake. This is probably just the start. Over the next few months, the Great Salt Lake could get another boost from more controlled water releases across its basin. Of course, this problem is far from over, but every drop of water helps. If these efforts keep going, Utah might actually have a fighting chance to save this precious lake and keep the area from possibly turning into a desert. Lake Michigan is one of the largest and most mysterious freshwater lakes in the United States. And now, deep inside it, scientists have stumbled upon something unexplainable. Vast, round craters scattered all across the lake's floor. It all started in 2022. A team of researchers wanted to map the lake's bottom and look for some shipwrecks. At first, they were sure it's going to be just some typical rocky terrain or sandy patches. But what they saw on their sonar screens stopped them cold. Strange, circular shapes that looked almost too perfect to be natural. They were hiding about 500 feet beneath the surface, in places where the water turns dark and impenetrable. Those guys are huge, ranging from 300 to 600 feet wide. They also plunge nearly 40 feet deep. And there are dozens of them, neatly arranged like some footprints. but the team had no idea what these things were. Then, in August 2024, the mystery only deepened. Using a remotely operated vehicle, they got a closer look at these formations. There were about 40 of them. No one had ever seen anything quite like this before in the Great Lakes. What could have created those craters? Could they be ancient? Perhaps remnants of some geological event lost to time? If that's the case, it's weird how long these holes have likely been sitting there, undisturbed. Theories started popping up. One possibility was that they could be sinkholes or dolines. Those are basically holes that suddenly appear in the ground when the surface layer collapses. The rock beneath the surface, often made of limestone, gets slowly dissolved by water over time, creating voids underground. When the surface of those voids can no longer hold its own weight, it caves in, and this forms a hole. Think of it like when you poke a straw through the lid of a drink. Sinkholes can be small dips or huge, spanning up to 2,000 feet. They can happen gradually or all at once. Sometimes they can swallow entire cars or even buildings. And Lake Michigan sits on limestone bedrock. It erodes pretty easily when water flows through it. Sinkholes like these have already been found in Lake Huron, and they look kinda similar. But there are some plot holes, no pun intended, with this theory. For example, it's wild how they all would be so huge. It's also weird and pretty rare for sinkholes to occur in a lakebed. They also kinda resemble a straight pattern. They seem to extend generally southward, forming a loose line, which is pretty weird. If these are sinkholes, then they're definitely not playing the usual geological rules. Though it might be some new, unusual process at play beneath the lake's surface that we haven't discovered yet. There's another theory though: glaciers. Glaciers are wild rivers of ice. They covered much of the Earth during the last ice age, and they're incredibly powerful. While they might move slowly, sometimes only a few inches per day, they have such immense weight that they can reshape entire landscapes over thousands of years. Glaciers can grind and scoop the land beneath them. They're basically like colossal bulldozers. Their weight, combined with the slow but steady movement, grounds down everything beneath them: rocks, soil, even bedrock. This can create deep gouges in the Earth's surface, called glacial troughs. During the last ice age, there were lots of glaciers all over the northern US, including the Great Lakes region. If they moved across what is now Lake Michigan, they could have carved out these deep holes. Glaciers often move in a pretty straight path. As they move, they cause terrain to erode, but the resulting erosion varies based on terrain. Sometimes there are places where the bedrock is softer or fractured, and these places are more easily carved and crushed by the glacier. That could explain why some holes could be bigger and deeper than others. Harder bedrock is less affected. But usually this leads to rounded, crescent-shaped depressions known as chatter marks. Those marks are more like grooves rather than circular, big craters like those in Lake Michigan. Once the glaciers melted, the Great Lakes themselves formed. If the craters were formed by them, they may have filled with water, becoming part of the Michigan Lake. Though this theory is more like a speculation, so we need more evidence. But there's another layer to this mystery. The craters are not just curious geological formations. They actually may hold valuable clues about early life on Earth. Parts of Lake Michigan, especially dark ones, are relatively low in oxygen. It's like a lighter version of deep ocean environments that often have very little of this element. For example, hydrothermal vents deep in the ocean, underwater openings in the Earth's crust with some hot, mineral-rich water that are often very low in oxygen. But some organisms love places like these. For example, opossum shrimp. Teeny tiny shrimp-like creatures that love cold, deep waters. They get their name because they have a pouch to carry their young until they're ready to be on their own, like an opossum. Or deep-water sculpin fish. small bottom-dwelling fish that also enjoys cold lakes. They're well adapted to living in dark waters and usually stay close to the lakebed. And weird organisms like invasive quagga mussels, which kinda look like shells. These are small freshwater mussels that have spread there to the Great Lakes. They attach themselves to hard surfaces and can cause problems for ecosystems by competing with native species for food and space. All these guys could be in Lake Michigan, and even more. There might be microbes or even bacteria that are specially adapted to these harsh conditions, just like it was in Lake Huron. There's only a handful of creatures that could survive deep within these craters, and studying them could give us insight into how life once flourished in Earth's ancient, oxygen-poor oceans. That's because it's in places similar to these where some of the earliest life forms thrived. Early Earth had an atmosphere with little oxygen, although it was much more hot, and ancient microbes adapted to this. The Great Lakes, especially Lake Michigan, have always had a bit of a ghostly reputation. Like, even this mission was organized to study the shipwrecks. There were about 6,000 of them in the Great Lakes. Many of these wrecks are still sitting on the lakebeds, preserved by the cold, fresh waters. And shipwrecks aren't the only strange things tied to the Great Lakes. Over the years, there have been stories of unexplained disappearances. Boats and even planes have vanished without a trace. The lakes, often calm on the surface, can suddenly turn dangerous with unpredictable storms and massive waves, leading to these mysterious events. Not even mentioning all the creepy stuff people notice there over the centuries, such as ghostly lights above water or bizarre weather patterns like eerie, sudden fogs that seem to appear out of nowhere. In 2007, they even discovered some prehistoric structure that looks like Stonehenge there. Well, it was way smaller, but still. It lay about 40 feet below the surface in the heart of Grand Traverse Bay, and it's speculated to be about 9,000 years old, way older than Stonehenge. Looks like this is a print of those who lived in the area thousands of years ago. These massive stones are arranged in a careful, winding pattern stretching over a mile. They range in size from basketballs to compact cars. But one, in particular, stands out. A boulder 3.5 to 4 feet tall, 5 feet wide. It's etched with the image of a mastodon, a creature that roamed the Earth about 11,000 years ago before it went extinct. It probably sank there during the end of the last ice age we mentioned. This period had reshaped the region. This place is underwater now, but back in the day, it was still dry land. So the stones were probably created by people who lived there, though we're not sure why. Were they used as hunting blinds? Or was it some sort of an ancient calendar? Who knows? Only about 15% of the Great Lakes floors have been explored. Now, scientists are gearing up for a deeper dive into this mystery, both literally and figuratively. They want to analyze the lake beds surrounding the craters, hoping that maybe something in the environment around them might have caused them to appear. They have initiatives like Lakebed 2030. These missions should map the entire underwater landscape. This would help us learn tons of interesting stuff about Lake Michigan and our planet's past. Who knows what other secrets these dark waters hide? There's a lake in the heart of Asia that holds 1/5 of all the world's liquid freshwater. It's more than all the 5 Great Lakes have together. Even if all the rivers on our planet suddenly changed their direction and set on a mission to drain this lake, it would take them a whole year to finish the job. I'm talking about the deepest lake in the world, Lake Baikal. If you decide to go all the way down to its deepest point, prepare for a journey of almost 5,400 feet. The descent takes several hours, but the rift floor of the lake is way deeper, between 5 to 7 miles beneath the surface. It means it could be even further down than the Challenger Deep, which is the deepest known place on Earth. The amount of water it has would be enough for everyone on Earth to have something to drink for up to 50 years. This mighty giant of a lake replenishes its water completely every 383 years. Baikal has a great delivery crew of over 300 rivers and streams, bringing their waters right in. And only one river flows out of Baikal, the Angara, which is headed straight for the Arctic Ocean. Baikal isn't only the deepest, but also the oldest existing freshwater lake in the world. It formed at least 25 million years ago. It all began when the Earth's crust decided to play Tetris and created the lake and the surrounding mountains. At some point, Baikal must have been just a humble riverbed, but then tremors and fractures shook the Earth, and the distance between the shores got bigger. Water levels rose thanks to the melting glaciers. Then, several lakes formed and later merged into one. Baikal is one of around 20 lakes in the world that are older than 1 million years. And since it wasn't disturbed by glacial periods, it's a perfect research ground for scientists. Its deep-drilled core sediments can tell a lot about the climate of our planet in different periods. Since Baikal is in a rift basin with 2,000 seismic tremors per year, the lake is deepening and still growing in size. Its shores drift apart at around the same rate as South America and Africa are moving away from each other, so it has all the potential to become an ocean. Another thing Baikal has in common with the oceans is that it has water rich in oxygen, even at its lowest depths. This is one of the reasons why the fauna of the lake is so incredibly rich. It's home to over 2,500 various animals and 1,000 plant varieties. Around half of them are unique and only exist in this area, like the endemic algae, the Baikal omul fish, and the Baikal oilfish. There are also some bears, elk, and lynx living on its shores. They must appreciate the fact that the temperatures around the lake are always higher than the rest of Siberia, thanks to its huge water mass. Most Baikal dwellers prefer to stick to the bottom of the lake, but there's one brave guy you'll meet if you decide to visit. Meet the Baikal seal, also known as Nerpa. It's the only true freshwater seal in the world. Nerpa's eyes are so cute it nearly landed the part of Puss in Boots in Shrek. Nerpa in Boots sounds good to me. These huge eyes are there to help them follow their favorite pelagic fish underwater. There are other seal kinds that can handle freshwater or use it to breathe, but these cuties spend their entire lives in it. But wait, how did seals, which are supposed to be oceanic creatures, end up in a lake miles and miles away from the sea? About 400,000 years ago, during the Pleistocene era, these adventurous creatures traveled up the river and drainage systems that connected Lake Baikal to the Arctic Ocean. The ringed seal that still lives in the Arctic is believed to be the Baikal seal's closest ancestor. Today, Baikal seals are confined to their freshwater home because of the changes in waterways. And they seem to be pretty happy with their home as they can choose from a huge variety of food to eat. The seals mostly hang out in the north and central areas of the lake, but move south in the winter. The lake gets covered with ice, which they use as a chill-out zone, just like their oceanic cousins use rocks or the beach. Since at least 1969, Lake Baikal has had some mysterious ice rings pop up randomly here and there. At some point, they got so big that the astronauts even spotted them from space. The rings usually appear in late April, but can be there in January or May. Scientists couldn't crack the code on how these rings form for a while. They had all sorts of theories, and the most popular involved methane gas bubbles from the lake's depths. But then, scientists noticed that some of the rings were in shallower waters, where gas emissions don't happen. So, an international team of scientists decided to solve the mystery. They traveled to Lake Baikal, drilled holes in the ice, and dropped sensors into the water. In 2016, when they started the research, they heard that 2 vans had gotten stuck in the mysterious ice rings. Once they had analyzed the data from the sensors, it turned out that the secret behind the rings was warm eddies flowing clockwise under its ice cover. The currents were less intense in the center of the eddies, so the ice above them was thicker at the edges. The waters of the lake are so clear that you can see some extremely deep parts up to over 130 feet down. This is thanks to the surrounding mountains that send off melting ice right in. Plankton that live in the lake also helps clean the floating debris. When this crystal clear water freezes, it forms an unusually thick and see-through layer of ice. The wind likes to play sculptor on Baikal and creates one-of-a-kind pieces of art here. It picks up water, which, of course, freezes into the most unusual designs. Frozen bubbles and icicles you've never seen before. The location and geography of the lakes and the cycles of melting and refreezing create the perfect conditions for this ice workshop. And you can even see rocks that seem to be floating. The bottom of the rock freezes to the surface of the ice. Then, the strong winds wear away the surroundings, leaving a perfect pedestal for the rock. If you think the floating rocks look eerie, how about Baikal's version of the Loch Ness Monster? The local Buryat people have a legend about the water dragon master that lives in the lake. A dragon is believed to be the most powerful creature living on Earth in Asian mythology. They believe there are 4 dragons living in the 4 seas, each responsible for one of the cardinal directions. Baikal is the North Sea in this story. The image of this dragon is supposedly etched in ancient petroglyphs on the cliffs of Baikal. There's also a hefty stone slab that looks like a monument dated back to somewhere between the 3rd and the 9th century BCE, depicting a mysterious water monster. Imagine the stories this stone could tell, echoing the whispers of a bygone era and leaving us to unravel the enigma of the Baikal cliffs. The legend says that a local warrior was chasing the dragon. He finally reached the largest Baikal island of Alkan. He was ready to face and defeat the dragon, but the beast turned into a beautiful girl, and they got married. That's one unusual twist to a classic defeat the dragon and take the girl story. So, local legends describe that dragon as a giant sturgeon with an almost gator-like snout and armored body. In reality, the mythical monster must be one of the many huge fish living in the lake. They can afford to grow to several feet in length thanks to the high levels of oxygen in the water. Beluga sturgeon can weigh several thousands of pounds, lives up to 50 or 60 years, and never stops growing. This area might just be the most important spot in America right now, as it is worth over $1 trillion. There's something incredibly valuable hidden right here at Thacker Pass, and it is going to shake things up, not just in Nevada, but in the US economy and its global relations. The McDermott Caldera is a massive area, about 28 miles long by 22 miles wide, stretching across northern Nevada and southern Oregon. It's in Humboldt County, a quiet, rural place with just one main city that's going to change a lot in the next 5 to 10 years. That's because they found white gold there. We're talking about lithium. And to explain why this metal is so important, we need a scale. On one side, we place a chunk of lithium, and on the other, an apple. What do you think will happen? If both have the same volume, the scale is going to tip toward the apple. That's because lithium is super light. Its density is about 0.3 ounces per cubic inch, which makes it the lightest solid you can find at room temperature. Lithium is also extremely reactive. That means it combines with other elements very easily, and it can catch fire just as easily. Mix it with water, fire. Expose it to air, yep, fire again. But when you combine its lightness with its high reactivity, you get a material that's perfect for batteries, like the one powering your smartphone, laptop, or even your electric car. Nevada's been hiding this treasure for about 16 million years. The McDermott Caldera used to be a volcanic hotspot, spewing molten rock and creating a huge lake filled with mineral-rich waters. Over time, that lake dried up, leaving behind thick layers of clay loaded with lithium. Right now, Thacker Pass Mine is sitting on one of the biggest untapped lithium reserves in the world, worth about $1.5 trillion. If everything goes as planned, they expect it to produce about 40,000 tons of high-quality lithium a year, And that's enough to make batteries for up to 800,000 electric cars. Like I mentioned earlier, this metal is the backbone of modern batteries. And with the world racing toward green energy, the demand for lithium is skyrocketing. Since 2020, its price has gone up more than 10 times, making it the most expensive battery metal in the world. That means it's way more expensive than magnesium, nickel, cobalt, and other materials used in rechargeable batteries. Right now, we're using about 1.16 million tons of lithium per year, and roughly 85% of it goes into making batteries, mostly for cars. Between 2030 and 2040, experts think we will need to double the money we're putting into production, from $94 billion to $188 billion. At the same time, investment in batteries will jump by over 200%, reaching $686 billion. Finally, by 2050, the demand for lithium is expected to be more than 10 times higher than what we're producing now. Sorry, I know that's a lot of numbers, but I just want to show how important Thacker Pass will be for the whole world. This mine is going to be key to keeping everything running. I mean, literally, since most of the future demand will be for things like cars, electric bikes, scooters, and renewable energy storage. Nevada could also be the epicenter of a global energy revolution, with the US aiming to cut pollution by 50% by 2030. A big part of that is replacing gas-powered vehicles with electric ones. And to make that happen, America is going to need a whole lot more lithium than it's producing right now. Nowadays, most of the metal used in the United States come from countries like Chile and Argentina. So if America wants to be a leader in this market, it really needs to invest more and more in projects like Thacker Pass. But there's another challenge. Finding lithium in a mine is one thing, but refining it is another story. Just like diamonds are carefully cut and shaped to bring out their sparkle and sold in rings and necklaces, something similar needs to be done with lithium. The raw material that comes from the mines has to be refined into a pure form that can actually be used in things like batteries. And China pretty much dominates this part of the market, and they're responsible for about 75% of global lithium-ion battery production. In other words, it doesn't matter if a country finds this powerful metal on its land, it will probably still need China to help refine it. So, the US is eager to strengthen its supply chain. In fact, they're so excited about this possibility that authorities have invested over $2 billion in loans into the Nevada project. Because of that, Thacker Pass could make the US a leader in lithium production worldwide. If their estimates are right, the McDermott caldera could hold nearly half of the world's known lithium reserves. It would almost double the reserves found in Bolivia's salt flats, for example, which used to hold the record for the world's largest deposit. This discovery is about to change Humboldt County for good. Those quiet streets surrounded by nature will never feel the same again. The mine will need about 2,000 workers who will probably move there from other cities. Those workers will need houses, hospitals, schools for their kids, and all the necessary services. Do you see how it's like a ripple effect? For every person hired to work on the project during construction, 6 more people will get hired in the state to support them. Thacker Pass is also going to have a huge impact on the economy, not just in Nevada, but all across the country. People expect the mine to be active for 35 years, and each year it's expected to generate over $2 billion. But here's the thing. In Thacker Pass, they'll be extracting lithium from clay, and this process has never been done on such a huge scale before. So it's kind of a hit or miss. But if it works, it could completely change the industry. Big question. Who's interested in all this? Well, we've got 3 big companies eyeing the lithium market in the US. First, there's ExxonMobil. The oil giant wants to start producing lithium by 2027, and they have plans to become the top supplier for electric vehicles by 2030. Then there's General Motors, the company behind big car brands like Chevrolet and Cadillac. They're so interested in this business that they agreed to pay $625 million for a 38% stake in Thacker Pass. And finally, Tesla. In 2023, they started building a factory in Texas to process lithium. It's all part of their plan to handle more of their supply chain themselves. Now that you know how important lithium is, you might be wondering, what if we run out? Well, that could happen, since it comes from mining and, just like gold, is a finite resource. But that doesn't mean we'd have to give up smartphones or electric cars. If we ever run out of this metal, we'd probably find new ways to produce batteries. In fact, some experts think thermal batteries could be the next big thing. They store extra energy from renewable resources like wind or solar power, which are very cheap. So they represent a new way of storing energy at a small fraction of the cost. Nowadays, they're primarily used for powering the production of steel, cement, and chemicals. Thermal batteries are also being used to heat and cool large buildings. However, more and more projects are focusing on bringing this technology into private spaces, like houses and apartments. Experts are optimistic that initiatives like these could make thermal batteries as well known as electric batteries, and they might soon become a regular part of our daily lives. We know more about space than we do about the ocean. We know more about the ocean than we do about the Earth's core. But how do we study something that lies more than 1,000 miles beneath our feet? Oddly enough, you need to fly into space. Thanks to satellites orbiting the planet, scientists have discovered something strange at the very heart of the planet. News about mysterious signals from space barely surprises anyone. But how about this? We detected strange signals coming from deep beneath our own home. Before we go into those signals, we need to understand why it's so important to study what's inside the planet. How does the core affect us? Our lives depend on it in several crucial ways. First, the core plays a fundamental role in gravity. We don't drift off into space because a massive spherical mass of molten metal locks us to the surface. Second, it powers Earth's magnetic field. Dangerous cosmic radiation and solar wind that could scorch everything are blocked thanks to the planet's magnetic field. And third, the inner processes of the Earth influence earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Any disturbance inside the core and mantle can change life on the planet. And recently, scientists recorded something unusual coming from down there. At the beginning of this century, the United States and Germany launched a mission called GRACE, the Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment. At first, this project used 2 satellites to track how water moved around the planet and how glaciers were melting. But the satellites could also measure Earth's gravitational field. If gravity was slightly stronger or weaker in some region, one of the satellites would be pulled toward that spot, and the other would measure the change in distance. In very simple terms, the heavier something is, the stronger its gravitational pull. In certain parts of the planet, gravity can be slightly higher because of large geological shifts, ocean currents, or melting ice. But between 2006 and 2008, the GRACE satellites detected a strange change in gravity along the coast of Africa. Melting ice, water movement, and other natural phenomena couldn't explain the anomaly. No one knew what it was at the time, but years later, scientists suggested that the nature of this signal was coming from the Earth's core. Researchers noticed that some minerals, like perovskite, can undergo a phase transition when exposed to enormous pressure and extreme heat. And there are many perovskites lying in the upper layers of the mantle. When the internal structure of this mineral reshapes, it becomes denser and shifts the surrounding rocks. Deep underground, this harder, solid part moves the softer molten rock. These movements reach the molten outer core and slightly deform it. This deformation inside the core alters the flow of molten iron, and this deep current of liquid metal directly affects Earth's magnetic field. That's why satellites recorded those fluctuations. So how does all of this affect us? We launch satellites, we use compasses, we rely on GPS. All of this works only because gravity and the magnetic field are stable. And both depend on the core. That's why it's so important to study the Earth's heart. And to do that, we don't need to dig thousands of miles. Movements on the surface can reveal what is happening inside. Studying vibrations in the crust, recording gravitational shifts, calculating, modeling, and forming hypotheses. It all sounds a little boring. Is there another way to figure out what's happening down there? We sent Voyagers into space, and some of them have already left the solar system. We descend into the depths of the Mariana Trench inside bathyskiffs. So what's the problem with drilling a shaft deep into the Earth's crust? Humanity actually has some experience with this. In the 1970s, Soviet geologists began drilling the Kola Super Deep borehole. It became and remains the deepest artificial borehole ever created. Its depth reaches 7.6 miles, deeper than the Mariana Trench and higher than Mount Everest. More than 50 years have passed, and humanity has not gone deeper than 7.6 miles. And do you know where the Earth's core begins? At about 1,800 miles down. That's almost 7 times farther than the distance to the International Space Station. To reach the core, we would need to drill a hole 230 times deeper than the Kola Super Deep. But that project was shut down in 1992, and the borehole was closed in 2005. What stopped us from digging deeper? First, the density of the rock. In the early stages, the drill easily cut through granite, but around 4.3 miles down, the rock became much harder. The drill broke several times. Workers had to change the drilling direction to pass through softer layers. Eventually, the borehole shape looked like a string of lights hanging on a Christmas tree. Another problem was heat. The deeper the engineers went, the hotter it became. Scientists expected that past a depth of 10,000 feet, the temperature would be around 212 degrees Fahrenheit. In reality, the harder they worked, the worse it got. Eventually, it reached 356 degrees Fahrenheit. The hottest place on Earth is the Sonoran Desert along the Mexican-US border. Temperatures there can reach 177 degrees Fahrenheit. That's twice as cool as inside that terrifying borehole. And the challenges did not stop there. At a depth of about 14,800 feet, the rock became porous. The extreme heat gave it a strange plasticity. Instead of solid stone, the drill had to cut through something more like hot, softened material that was almost impossible to drill. On top of that, the stability of the shaft became a danger. At such depths, the walls could collapse at any moment. To drill deeper, humanity would need completely new technology, a drill capable of working at 500 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the temperature scientists expect in the upper mantle, located just beneath the crust. And to reach it, we would need to drill 25 miles down, almost 3 times deeper than the Kola Super Deep. There are many rumors about what the engineers supposedly discovered in that hole. The most popular claim is that they heard the screams of thousands of people who were stuck in the fiery underworld. Other fake stories claim that the workers went insane after seeing something horrific at the bottom, and that's why the project was stopped. But if we ignore these myths, what did scientists actually find? They learned that the existing temperature model of Earth's interior was wrong. It was far hotter down there than expected. Geologists thought they would find the so-called Conrad discontinuity, a transition from granite to basalt. They found no such boundary. The real discovery was a liquid at incredible depths. Scientists found cracks filled with briny water. This changed our understanding of the crust. People used to believe it was completely solid, but now it appears full of fractures and channels through which water can move. Where did it come from? Geologists think the fluid was squeezed out of the rocks by enormous pressure, as water is wrung out of a sponge. But the most astonishing discovery was life. At about 4.5 miles down, engineers found ancient fossils of single-celled marine organisms. They were nearly 2 billion years old, and they had survived at such extreme heat and pressure. Let's imagine that one day we actually reach the mantle. What would that give us? What would we expect to see? We would finally understand how Earth formed billions of years ago, how the core, mantle, and crust developed, and how plate tectonics works. We'd know how the plates push and pull against each other. We'd gain a deeper understanding of earthquakes. Researchers also hope to find extremophiles. These are primitive organisms that can withstand extreme heat and pressure. If we discover life near the mantle or even within it, scientists will study it closely and try to understand how it manages to survive under such brutal conditions. If we learn what keeps life alive in the most hostile environment beneath our feet, we might learn how to protect life in other extreme places. From the depths of the ocean to distant planets, studying the heart of our planet could reveal technologies we can barely imagine today. Our future might depend on the mysteries hidden beneath our own world.
On January 14, 2022, residents of Anchorage, Alaska heard a series of loud bangs. They didn't stop for a half an hour. As they found later, the source of the bangs was almost 6,000 miles away in the Tongan archipelago in the southern Pacific Ocean. The Hunga Tonga underwater volcano abruptly woke up from its sound sleep. It last erupted at the end of December 2021 after several years of inactivity. Hunga Tonga sent a large plume of ash into the stratosphere that was seen in the capital city of Tonga, 43 miles away from the volcano. In the following days, it was emitting steam and gas to the height of 7 miles. Plus, it was letting out ash that accumulated next to it and even made the island on which it was standing increase in size. Then it went back to sleep, and the officials even announced it was dormant. But just a couple of weeks later, it woke up again with a crazy force. It sent ash clouds 12 miles into the atmosphere. It blocked the sun in some places and rained down from the sky. The sound waves from the eruption traveled around the planet several times. People in Fiji heard a sound that reminded them of thunder. Some booms even reached Canada. Shockwaves went around the Earth 4 times in Japan and Utah, and at least twice in Massachusetts. The eruption caused tens of thousands of lightning flashes. It also triggered a mega tsunami hundreds of feet high. It caused damage to buildings and infrastructure, such as underwater cables. The extreme waves traveled all the way to the California coast, and there was an unusually high tide along the Pacific coast of Canada. Scientists studied seismic data to understand what caused such a massive eruption. Their research models showed that there was a big blast, likely because gas got trapped in rocks, like how a pressure cooker works when it's overcooked. This blast released a huge amount of energy, as much as 5 of the biggest underground nuclear tests. It all happened under a shallow part of the sea, where gas-filled rock was trapped. Now, normally when a volcano erupts, the fumes cause a temporary cooling effect on the Earth's surface. But Hunga Tonga's eruption was different. It didn't produce many fumes, but released a massive amount of water vapor, equal to 60,000 Olympic swimming pools. The intense heat of the eruption turned vast amounts of seawater into steam, which then blasted high into the atmosphere. All that water vapor ended up in the stratosphere, a layer of the atmosphere that's too dry to form clouds or rain. Scientists don't have any observations of volcanic eruptions like Hunga Tonga to predict its long-term effects on our weather patterns. This is because the only way to measure stratospheric water vapor is with special satellites, which have only been around since 1979, and there hasn't been an eruption similar to Hunga Tonga in that time. In fact, the Tonga eruption is the most well-recorded blast of its kind in recent history. Scientists had lots of tools to study it, like satellites that took pictures from space and sensors that listened to the vibrations and movements in the Earth. There was a similar eruption in 1991 at a volcano in the Philippines, but back then, they didn't have as many advanced tools as they do now to study it closely. Experts from different countries looked at satellite data right after the Hunga Tonga eruption. They wanted to find out how long water vapor would stay in the stratosphere, where it would go, and of course, what this would mean for the planet and for all of us. The first big result of the eruption, at least partially, was a huge hole in the stratosphere that was hanging on for several months in 2023. By the time it appeared, the water vapor had reached the polar stratosphere over Antarctica. But Hunga Tonga ended up with just a minimal effect on global average temperatures, at least for now. Let's just hope it won't repeat the story of Mount Tambora volcano in present-day Indonesia. Over 2 centuries ago, in 1815, this bad guy interrupted and caused the year without a summer. In the following year, the winter was unusually cold and wet across Europe and North America. There were also some catastrophic tsunamis, destroying homes that took 10,000 lives and 80,000 more who fell ill in the aftermath. Now, you can't miss an event like Hunga Tonga or Tambora eruption, but some underwater volcanoes are discovered by accident. A passenger on a commercial flight looked out her window above the Pacific Ocean and saw a weirdly colored patch on the water. She thought it could be an oil slick or a floating pumice raft, which is a telltale sign of a recent volcanic eruption. She decided to send a photo of this scene to a geologist. And that's how scientists found one of the largest volcanoes in the world, Havre. It's hiding about 3,000 feet below the surface. In 2012, Havre had a massive eruption that lasted about 90 days. Hot lava poured out of 14 different vents around the volcano's semicircle-shaped opening. Havre is just one of many volcanic systems covered by thousands of feet of water. These volcanoes are the most active on Earth and are part of a giant system called mid-ocean ridges that stretches around the world. This system produces about 75% of all the magma that comes out of Earth's volcanoes each year. It releases over half a cubic mile of lava. When the magma cools down, it forms the edges of new ocean plates, which are like giant puzzle pieces that make up the Earth's crust. A team of scientists studied material left on the ocean floor by volcanic eruptions from the Bronze Age. About 3,600 years ago, a volcano that was partly underwater in the southern Aegean Sea woke up with a bang. This eruption destroyed the island of Santorini and sent massive amounts of ash, rocks, and gases into the air. It left behind thick layers of ash and rock that settled in piles on the ocean floor. Scientists have been studying the ancient Santorini eruption for several years to figure out what happens during such massive ones. Their research helps explain how future volcanic eruptions could affect the weather on our planet. The study also helps scientists understand the strength of the eruptions, how high the eruption columns might go, and the sizes of the waves that form when all that ash and rock settles into terraces on the ocean floor. This information will help predict the dangers of future eruptions. Now, when a volcano erupts, the last place you want to be is inside it. But scientists did it for you. Well, kinda. They produced a smart new imaging technique that uses the best ideas from medical imaging and optical telescopes. Matrix imaging, that's what it's called, makes it easier to understand what's happening underground, even when there aren't many sensors available. These sensors, called geophones, detect and record the movement of seismic waves, which are vibrations that travel through the Earth. By studying these waves, scientists can learn about the distinct types of rocks and how they are arranged beneath the surface. The researchers test their method on a volcano in Guadalupe in the Caribbean Sea. There aren't so many geophones on this site, but the scientists combined the data from multiple geophones thanks to this new tech. They used a special trick called the memory effect to reverse the distortions that happen when seismic waves bounce off different underground materials and figure out what the original signals look like. The researchers could clearly see the structure inside the volcano down to a depth of about 6 miles, with incredibly detailed images in a resolution of over 300 feet. They found out that there are many layers of magma stored underground. These layers are connected to other deep parts of the Earth. Knowing about these layers and how they work could help scientists make better guesses about when a volcano might erupt. If they can do that, they might be able to warn people earlier and keep them safe from dangerous eruptions.
In Hawaii, the Big Island is quite literally expanding. Every few years, glowing rivers of lava spill from Kilauea or Mauna Loa, and pour into the ocean, instantly turning seawater into steam and molten rock into a brand new coastline. Since the 1980s, eruptions have added hundreds of acres of new land. Far to the north, Alaska's capital has a very unique position. Juneau may look like any other city on a map, but there's one catch. You can't drive there. Huge mountains and massive glaciers block every route, leaving the town completely cut off from the rest of the continent. Seriously, the only way in or out is by boat or plane. Up in Alaska's far north, the city of Utqiagvik spends about 66 days in polar night from mid-November to mid-January with no sunrise. Then it flips to weeks of 24/7 daylight in summer. The Outer Banks in North Carolina are known for slowly moving west, getting pushed inland by waves and storms that scoop up sand from the ocean side and drop it on the sound side. It's known as the place where hurricanes can easily create new inlets. In California's Eureka Dunes, sand can sing. When dry sand grains move down a slope, they bump against each other and create a deep humming or booming noise that can last for several seconds. Scientists refer to this phenomenon as booming sand, but early explorers believed the desert was growling. Some places can't sit still, and others refuse to stop growing. The Rocky Mountains, for example, are still growing. Unlike the older Appalachian Range, which stopped millions of years ago, the Rockies are geologically young and active. It's a slow process that can't be properly measured, but we do know that they are rising. Did you know that rivers are not always content with their direction? In the 1800s, the Chicago River flowed straight into Lake Michigan, all the way into the city's drinking supply. After years of sewage and sickness, engineers thought of something original. They made the river run backward. They dug canals, blasted through rock, and rerouted the current toward the Mississippi instead. To this day, the river still flows the wrong way. Kentucky is famous for being split between two time zones. The western half runs on Central Time, while the east keeps Eastern Time, meaning you can gain or lose an hour just by driving through the middle of the state. The Nevada desert is filled with ghost towns. There are over 600 of them. Most were born overnight during the mining booms, only to die just as fast when the gold ran out. Wooden saloons, empty banks, and rusting rail lines still sit under the sun like movie sets left behind. But what about a ghost town that has a fire burning underneath? In Pennsylvania, there's a place called Centralia that's been on fire since 1962. A coal seam beneath the town caught fire and never went out. It forced nearly everyone to move. The ground still smokes even today. Another fact, my favorite one, is about the whole island full of monkeys. Near the coast of South Carolina, Morgan Island is home to around 4,000 rhesus monkeys with no humans in sight. The monkeys were brought there for research decades ago, and the population exploded. Visitors aren't allowed ashore, partly to protect the colony and partly, well, because it belongs to monkeys now. In Montana's Glacier National Park, there's a mountain where one raindrop can choose 3 paths. Fall on one slope and it flows into the Pacific Ocean. Another sends it to the Atlantic. A third sends it north toward the Arctic. The spot is called Triple Divide Peak, and it's one of the few places on Earth where 3 oceans share a single starting line. And if you think 3-way water splits are rare, there's also the Continental Divide that doesn't actually divide anything. In Wyoming's Great Divide Basin, rainwater gets trapped in the middle and has nowhere to go. It doesn't reach the ocean at all, it just evaporates or sinks into the ground. A lonely no-exit zone in the middle of the continent. Mount Washington is famous because it once held the record for the fastest directly measured surface wind at 231 miles per hour in 1934. That's faster than a race car and strong enough to knock you flat in seconds. Have you ever heard about Lake Superior? It's so vast that it holds about 10% of all the world's surface freshwater. The sheer size of it changes the weather. It is creating its own fog and storms. It's so extremely cold that it affects the air above and produces its own snow. What about bioluminescence? In Florida's Indian River Lagoon, microorganisms called bioluminescent plankton light up the water at night, turning it into a soft electric blue when stirred. It's a rare and beautiful sight to behold. In the middle of Utah's Red Desert, there's a natural bridge so large it looks engineered by giants. It's called Landscape Arch, a ribbon of stone stretching nearly 300 feet from end to end. That's almost as long as a football field, yet only a few feet thick at its narrowest point. A section of it collapsed in the 1990s, and today it's so fragile that hikers can only admire it from a distance. However, Utah hides another enigmatic structure called the Upheaval Dome. Scientists aren't sure it's a meteor impact or the result of ancient salt pushing upward from below. Either way, it's a massive circular crater that looks like the desert tried to grow a mountain in the wrong direction. In Arizona, we have the Barringer crater. It's one of the best preserved meteor craters on Earth, about 3/4 of a mile wide and nearly 600 feet deep. Scientists believe it was carved out 50,000 years ago when a space rock the size of a small building slammed into the desert at around 29,000 miles per hour. In Michigan, between the two peninsulas, there's something unexpected: a floating post office. The Westcott Company has delivered mail on the river since the late 1800s. The J.W. Westcott II has done it since 1949. It's even got its own zip code, 48222. The ship sails up to passing freighters and delivers mail by rope and buckets. It's the only floating zip code in the country, and proof that even the Postal Service can be creative and cool. On the East Coast, Maryland happens to be the only U.S. state without natural lakes. The ones you see, like Deep Creek or Lake Habib, are human-made. Even Arizona has a couple of natural lakes. They just dry up during drought years. Southwest of there, Florida likes sinking holes. Below the sunny beaches and retirement communities is a landscape made of limestone, which dissolves in water. This creates thousands of sinkholes ranging from little pits in backyards to huge underwater caves. Central Florida even got the nickname Sinkhole Alley. Off the coast is one of the biggest examples, the Green Banana Hole, which goes 155 feet under the Gulf of Mexico. In Arkansas, there's this cool park that you have to visit. You can actually dig for treasure there. It's called Crater of Diamonds State Park. It's the only spot in the US where anyone can hunt for real diamonds and keep whatever they find. The park is sitting on an old volcanic crater that brought diamonds to the surface millions of years ago. Oklahoma, however, is infamous for its tornadoes. It averages around 50-plus tornadoes a year and ranks among the highest for their strength. Each spring, the sky there turns from calm blue to chaos in minutes. Another quirky place is in Wyoming. It's called Buford. It's known for having a population of just one person. It's right off Interstate 80, and for years, this one resident was also the mayor, store clerk, and postmaster all rolled into one. After about 2 decades, he moved on and the town got auctioned, complete with its gas station and the sign that proudly read, Population 1. Sounds haunted, huh? Well, that's it for today. I gave you 25 US facts to help you shine during your next trivia quiz. And you can hit like. See ya!
So it turns out that you can't drive between South America and North America. And there's a simple reason for that. There are no roads connecting the two continents, not even a rudimentary one. Technically, you could try your luck crossing on foot, but let me tell you, that would be a huge mistake. The region that connects the two continents is called the Darian Gap. It stretches across southern Panama's Darian province and the northern part of Colombia. The only land route there is a 60-mile jungle trek. Crossing it can take anywhere from 3 to 10 days. It depends on weather conditions, how much you're carrying, and honestly, just pure luck. Chance plays a big role here, because this isn't some chill, relaxing nature walk. It's a harsh, extreme environment known for being completely isolated and one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Still, people seem to forget that and go there anyway. Every year, the number of people crossing just keeps growing. In 2014, fewer than 10,000 people crossed the gap. In 2023, that number increased to 520,000. Now, you might be wondering, what are so many people doing in the middle of the two American continents, risking all that danger? Well, that's because the Darian Gap has become a route for refugees migrating to North America. But to get there, they face all kinds of dangers, from insect bites and infections to serious fractures. We're talking about a no-man's land. Since there are no police stations, immigrants must also watch out for thieves. Along the way, they have no choice but to rely on and support each other. Most people start the crossing with at least a tent or tarp, rain boots, water, and some food. But these things get heavy fast, and people normally can't carry enough supplies for the entire journey. At some point, people start drinking river water to avoid dehydration. But the water's full of bacteria and dirt, so it causes intestinal issues. And if things get serious, there's no medical help there. To make this whole scenario even worse, the temperatures are brutal, often hitting over 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, a small subset of people who venture through the Darian Gap are hardcore adventurers and travelers looking for a survival experience in the jungle. But this region is no place for a relaxing vacation. A group of tourists who went there in 2023 ended up getting jungle rot, a fungus that affects the feet. The situation got so bad that a woman had to be carried out by the group on the last day because she couldn't walk. No matter how prepared people are for the Darian Gap, in the end, survival mostly comes down to luck. Out there, travelers won't find cities with solid infrastructure where they can crash at a hotel and gear up for the next day. In some spots, they might stumble across basic camps right in the jungle. These camps might offer wooden platforms for tents, bucket showers, toilets, and even plates of chicken and rice. But it all comes at a price. Wi-Fi, for example, might cost $2 an hour, and that seems like a pretty good deal, considering there's no cell phone service on the trail. They pretty much lose all contact with the outside world. Now picture a dense rainforest with steep, muddy terrain. The hiking trail is littered with boulders and tangled with vines, like nature's own tripwires. It climbs sharply over a mountain, becoming a serious challenge even for someone in good physical shape. The area also gets constant heavy rainfall, which can lead to landslides, flash flooding, and extremely muddy conditions. The situation gets so intense that even the t-shirts and faces of those who make the crossing end up covered in mud. They'll also have to cross a lot of fast-moving rivers. A Venezuelan dad who recently went through the area with his 2 kids said their sneakers ripped apart on the very first day. That's how powerful the rivers can be. And they're deep, too. Sometimes the water reaches all the way up to their shoulders. But the dangers in that area aren't recent. For centuries, the Darian Gap was thought to be impossible to cross. The first Europeans who ventured into Latin America saw it as kind of a jungle training school. They totally knew about its dangers, but still, many adventurers tried to make the crossing in the years that followed. In 1854, for example, an expedition disappeared for 49 days in the jungle, battling starvation and exhaustion. Then again, in 1870, a group of 100 men set out to cross it. Even though they were well prepared and carried cutting-edge equipment for the time, they still suffered tremendously during the journey. They had to rely on incredible resilience to survive the challenge. Over the years, people who ventured in often ended up passing away from hunger, thirst, and even drowning in rivers. They also faced the risk of being attacked by dangerous animals like jaguars, white-lipped pecaries, and the fer-de-lance, a fast, irritable snake that is one of the most venomous out there. The area is also swarming with mosquitoes, which can spread serious health problems. Leaning against trees to rest can also be risky. This jungle is full of spiked chunga palm trees, which are covered in long black spines up to 8 inches long. Unfortunately for us, These spines are covered in all sorts of bacteria. Just brush against a chunga, and you could end up with infected wounds. And yet another danger is getting lost in the dense forest and never finding your way back to safety. These days, though, this risk is a lot lower. Some people have mentioned color-coded markers that help guide travelers and keep them from going the wrong way. If they see blue or green fabric tied to trees, it means keep walking. But if they spot red fabric, that's a sign they're going the wrong way and need to turn around quickly. Since there are so many dangers, why not just build a road through the Darian Gap? While it might seem like a good idea, building a road connecting Panama and Colombia isn't really that simple. The Darian Gap has a humid climate, tough terrain, and constant rainfall, which means any attempt to build a functional road would be highly challenging and super expensive. Even though there have been previous attempts to fill in the gap. See, there's a huge road system called the Pan-American Highway, which stretches all the way from Alaska to the southern tip of Argentina. Nowadays, this highway hits a roadblock right at the Darian Gap. But it wasn't supposed to be like this, as the original idea was for the road to go through there. Leaders from Latin American countries tried to make this plan happen in the 70s, and then again in the 90s. But a lot of people were against it, mainly because they wanted to protect the local communities and the rainforest. Since the Darian Gap is mostly untouched by humans, it's one of the most biodiverse places on the planet. It's believed that 1 in 5 species are endemic to the region, meaning they only exist in that specific area, like the Darian pocket gopher and the slatty slender mouse opossum. A road would have really damaged the ecosystem in the area, so the plans were scrapped. Eventually, an alternative was created to travel by sea. At least 2 companies started a ferry service connecting the 2 countries. However, the business wasn't profitable, and they ended up shutting down. Not long ago, Panama decided to close the Darian Gap route. Now they're sealed off with barbed wire fencing. It might just be a matter of time before other routes are created. But if you are an adventurer looking to visit South America, it's probably not best to wait for that. Traveling by plane to Colombia will always be a much safer option.
You can find many picturesque lakes in Louisiana, but one of them stands out among all the others. This deep lake is calm and beautiful, but its origin is closely connected with the story of a large-scale disaster that changed the entire ecosystem. A catastrophe that people managed to miraculously survive. And this disaster happened because of a mistake of just one person. To discover the incredible history of Lake Pinure, let's move back in time to more than 40 years ago. So, it's 1980, early morning of November the 21st. Several workers start their shift. They continue searching for oil. A drill on an oil rig in the middle of the small Lake Pinure is an important part of this process. The depth of this lake is about 11 feet. If a grown-up person stands on its bottom and raises their hands, their fingers will reach the surface of the water. Everything goes without problems at first, but then the drill stops. It seems to have jammed at the bottom. Workers try to free the drill, but they can't do it. The engine gets overloaded, and people hear a few pops coming from below. At this moment, the entire rig begins to lean toward the water. The workers on the platform realize that something terrible is happening, so they run to the shore. A strong rumble comes next. The colossal $5 million drilling rig, with a height of a 15-story building, is slowly sinking into the water. But the lake's depth is no greater than a 1-story building. How is it possible? Imagine the water leaving your bathtub through the drain hole. The same thing is happening to the lake now. The drill has punched a small hole in the walls of a salt mine, whose tunnels run through the rock under the lake. And now, millions of gallons of water are pouring into these tunnels. The created pressure is 10 times as great as that in a fire hydrant stream. The miners find out about the disaster. While the water is flooding the tunnels, they're trying to evacuate from the mine. 50 people are making their way through the water and mud using mine carts. A slow elevator can only lift 8 people at a time. It takes 7 approaches to evacuate all the miners. Can you imagine how the people at the end of the line feel? The devastating flood is behind you, and several dozen people and one slow elevator are ahead. Fortunately, all the people managed to escape. The water displaces the air from the mine, compressing it. First, it breaks through all the tunnels, and then it comes out from the ground in the form of geysers. But the disaster doesn't end there. A large funnel forms in the middle of the lake. The hole is expanding, pulling more water inside. The land around the lake begins to crumble and fall into the mine. Along with the soil, the funnel pulls in 11 barges, a tugboat, the entire oil platform, and many trees. The whole beach around the lake disappears. There's so much water in the salt cave that the direction of the flow of the nearest river changes. Now, not only the lake, but also the water from the surrounding area is flooding the mine. The funnel is expanding. From the side, you can see the formation of a massive waterfall with a height of 164 feet. This is the height of a 16-story building. At this moment, it's the highest waterfall in Louisiana. Fortunately, the destruction doesn't last long. 2 days have passed. The mine is completely flooded. The funnel has disappeared. The water calms down. Several days ago, it was a shallow lake. Now it has a new bottom, located at a depth of 200 feet. This changes the ecosystem forever. New species of fish and animals appear there. The drilling company paid a fine of $45 million to compensate for the damage to all flooded enterprises. Of course, people investigated the cause of this disaster. It turned out that the engineer made a mistake in the maps. He used incorrect calculations to select the drilling coordinates and got to the salt mine. There is another lake with a huge funnel inside, and it's also artificial. But this time, people created it on purpose. Welcome to California, to Lake Berryessa. Previously, there was a small farming town of Monticello near the lake. In the last century, people built a dam here. But during the rainy season, the water level in the lake rose and poured over the dam's edges. Water flooded the land and washed away roads. You need to make the dam even higher to solve the problem, right? This is quite logical, but the town's engineers thought of something better. They dug a hole near the lake and covered its insides with concrete. It looks like a wide circular tunnel leading into the ground. During the rainy season, the level of the water rises high enough to reach the pit, and millions of gallons of water pour into it. It resembles a giant drain hole in the bathroom. All the water entering the hole travels through a horizontal tunnel and gets into the nearest bay. This is an effective and practical invention and an excellent attraction for many tourists. Skateboarders also like to hang out here. When the water level is low, they gather at the bay, near the place where the water flows out. The round tunnel is an excellent playground for skateboarding. We're moving to the desert of Yemen. There, we're also looking for a hole, but without a lake this time. This hole, the size of a basketball court, is in the middle of the desert. Scientists still don't know what's at the bottom of the hole or what formed it, but the locals are sure this pit is a portal to the underground world where evil spirits live. Even if you don't believe in all this, the giant hole in Yemen can still scare you. Sometimes, strange, frightening sounds come from the depth of this black abyss, and there's always an unpleasant smell of rotten eggs wafting out of there. The hole is so dark, it absorbs sunlight. You won't see anything, even if you point a flashlight inside. People have studied this place with the help of powerful optical lenses and drones, but they couldn't see anything except the frightening darkness. From a distance, this place looks like a blob of black paint in the middle of a golden sandy canvas. Even now, the giant hole in Yemen is one of the most poorly studied and mysterious places on Earth. But recently, a group of brave people got down to its bottom. They found stalactites, snakes, and even waterfalls there. Scientists are trying to figure out how the hole appeared and how old it is. Some say that the hole was caused by construction works when geologists were drilling the soil in search of minerals. The drilling process made the surface of the ground collapse. And now, let's visit another famous hole hidden under a huge amount of water. It's the Mariana Trench. This is the deepest pit on Earth, located in the western Pacific Ocean near the Mariana Islands. It's so deep, it can fit 1.5 Everests. To dive to the bottom, you need special equipment that can withstand intense water pressure. It should be a sturdy bath escape with an ample supply of oxygen. It's expensive, but the trip is worth it. In the Mariana Trench, you can meet unique, strange creatures you will never see on the surface or in some other region of the ocean. Toxic crayfish and microorganisms feeding on a substance that looks like oil live here. You can meet fish with transparent bodies and see their organs and skeleton. Creepy, toothy monsters similar to anglerfish can swim by. These creatures seem fragile and harmless. But look at yourself. You're inside a bath escape made of alloys of several metals. Water pressure can turn an ordinary car into flatbread here. And these fish with transparent bodies swim as if they're just hanging out in the pool.
Roofs fly off like paper. Huge trees are yanked from the ground. Power lines snap and leave neighborhoods in the dark. Streets flood like rivers. Homes are left in ruins. That's a hurricane passing through. After the wind calms down, the real mess begins. People stranded, no clean water, destroyed roads. Storms have been picking up for like 5,700 years. And the scariest part is that in the last 20 years, there's been a huge spike. But let's start from the very beginning. This is Belize, a small country on the northeastern coast of Central America. And this is the Great Blue Hole, a huge, deep underwater sinkhole about 410 feet deep and approximately 50 miles off the coast of Belize. It formed around 10,000 years ago when the sea levels rose after the last ice age. A team of scientists arrived in Central America to study mud from way down in the Great Blue. They pulled out a long sample of sediment, which is basically layers of stuff that's settled over time. You might ask, so what? How are tropical storms connected with this sediment? Let's see. Tropical cyclones are big, spinning storms that form over warm ocean water. They pull up heat from the sea and blast it into the sky. And yeah, they can be devastatingly destructive, with super strong winds, heavy rain, and floods from big waves. And mud cores like the one the researchers pulled up are actually records of tropical storms. The sample they pulled up was 98 feet long, which made it the longest ever found in that area. Here's how it works. Every year, 2 thin layers of sediment settle in the hole where the weather is calm. But when a big storm hits, it leaves behind a different, messier layer. So by looking at these layers, scientists could tell how many storms hit that spot over the last 5,700 years. It's like counting tree rings, you know? Anyway, what they found was rather unexpected. It turns out that tropical cyclones had been getting more and more common. The lead researcher said that over the past 6,000 years, there were usually between 4 and 16 tropical storms or hurricanes every 100 years. But just in the last 20 years alone, they found signs of 9 storms in that same little area. That's way more than usual, and it shows how much things are changing. Scientists think there are 2 main reasons why tropical storms have been happening more often. One reason has to do with something called the Intertropical Convergence Zone, or ITCZ. This is an area near the equator where winds from the north and south come together. That spot has low air pressure, lots of moisture, and tons of thunderstorms. Just above it is the part of the Atlantic Ocean where most hurricanes are born. It even has an official name, the Hurricane Main Development Region. Normally, the ITCZ moves north in the summer and south in the winter because of changes in ocean temperatures. But over the past few thousand years, it's slowly been shifting farther and farther south. That's why the area where storms usually start has also moved south. It means storms are now forming and heading toward lower parts of the Atlantic than they used to. The second reason for the recent spike in storms is rising ocean temperatures. Earth has gotten warmer, and the ocean has warmed up too. The warm oceans help make more powerful storms. Such an increase likely means that this part of the world might see a lot more big storms in the future. If things keep going the way they are, scientists think the Caribbean could get hit by as many as 45 tropical storms and hurricanes by the end of this century. That's way more than anything the world has experienced in the last 5,700 years. There are just too many changes in the world that influence the situation. They create the perfect conditions for more storms to form and get really intense really fast. But if you think storms are getting more intense only over the ocean, let me tell you about America. A bunch of really dangerous storms, including tornadoes, dust storms, and wildfires, tore through several states in the Midwest and south of the USA in March 2025. At least 42 people lost their lives, and the scale of the devastation is enormous. What's scary is that most of this destruction didn't happen in the usual Tornado Alley area. Tornado Alley is a nickname for a part of the US where tornadoes happen a lot. It stretches through places like northern Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, parts of Louisiana, Iowa, Nebraska, and even eastern Colorado. But this time, storms hit places like Mississippi, Arkansas, and Alabama. Experts had warned this might happen. At the beginning of 2025, they said that tornadoes could start showing up more often farther east than usual, and that's exactly what's happening. One of their top weather experts said people in the Mississippi and Tennessee valleys should get ready for a rough spring. There are more people living in these areas than in traditional tornado zones, and many of them live in mobile homes or buildings without basements, which puts them at more risk when big storms hit. A tornado is basically a spinning tube of super strong wind that comes down from storm clouds and touches the ground. They can be really dangerous. To figure out how strong a tornado is, scientists use something called the Enhanced Fujita Scale. It goes from EF0, which stands for the weakest tornado, to EF5. Such a tornado is crazy strong, tear your house apart strong. The main question is, why are tornadoes happening more in the east now? In the US, tornado season usually kicks off in March. That's when cold air from Canada bumps into warm, wet air coming up from the Gulf of Mexico. And boom, storms start to form. But this year, things are a bit different. Here's what's going on. There's a big patch of high pressure, basically a chunk of calm, warm air hanging over the southwest. That's keeping things more stable out west, so fewer thunderstorms as well as fewer tornadoes are expected there. So, tornadoes are shifting eastward. Meanwhile, the Gulf of Mexico is super warm this year, and that's helping storms form in the southeastern US. The warm water adds a lot of energy to the atmosphere, which can lead to stronger, more frequent storms in places like Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee. Up north, around the Great Lakes and Northeast, it's staying cooler this spring. That means fewer big storms up there, at least for now. Now, let's get back to those devastating March storms. On March 14 and 15, a huge storm system blasted through parts of the central and southern US. This system brought 52 confirmed tornadoes, massive dust storms, and fast-moving wildfires. It all led to almost 1,100 canceled flights. About 150 million people were affected by this natural disaster. Two really strong tornadoes classified as EF4s hit Arkansas. The damage was incredible. One of those tornadoes, which hit a town called Diaz, had winds up to 190 miles per hour. That's insanely fast. For comparison, the average speed of a Formula One car is around 130 to 160 miles per hour. It was the first time in over 25 years that Arkansas got hit by two EF4s on the same day. Experts also recorded wind gusts moving at a speed of over 80 miles per hour in the southern plains. In Texas, dust storms led to fatal car crashes. Wildfires, caused and driven by the strong winds, burned through parts of Texas and Oklahoma. Oklahoma alone had more than 130 fires. So, what's next? Experts think the U.S. could see between 1,300 and 1,450 tornadoes in 2025. That's way more than the usual 1,225. And it's not just about tornadoes. A warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture. That means heavier rains, more flash floods, and even more powerful storms. Basically, the formula is the following. Warmer oceans plus warmer air equals stormy weather, especially in the east and southeast. But even if you don't live in any of these areas, you can't feel completely at ease either. Experts say tornadoes and other natural disasters can happen pretty much anywhere in the U.S. The risk moves around depending on the time of year and the weather.
The tranquil-looking Lake Manaun in Cameroon is one real trickster. At first, it may seem calm and peaceful, but this lake is like a fiery volcano waiting to erupt at any moment. And it doesn't even have the decency to give any warning signs. Its last outburst was way back in 1984, which caused a bang that left everyone in awe. It's like the lake's got a soda can mechanism down there, or in technical terms, it experiences a limnic eruption. This rare phenomenon happens when gas from deep under the water suddenly erupts. Certain things have to happen prior for it to occur though. There are some things you can look out for if you feel worried. For starters, if the vegetation around a lake looks a bit flattened, it might have previously experienced a limnic eruption. That's because the water can pop up with a lot of pressure and overflow. The water being a bit warmer all of a sudden can also mean you need to head to safety. There's this lake in Kazakhstan that looks like a total disaster on the surface, with empty tree trunks sticking out of the water. Not cute. But if you're feeling daring and want to take a swim, you'll be transported to a whole new world. Its story goes back to the year 1911, when there was a landslide that filled the valley with rainwater, completely submerging a local forest. As mesmerizing as it might sound, it's no easy task to dive in. The water is freezing, and all the algae, plants, and submerged trees make it a risky obstacle course. Have you heard about this scorching lake on the sunny Caribbean island of Dominica? The water around the edges is at a sweltering 180 to 197 degrees Fahrenheit. No wonder no one has the guts to measure the middle. It's that hot. Sure, the heat may go down once in a while, but who knows when those waters will start boiling again? Plus, this place is full of nasty gases like carbon dioxide. Because of them, let's just say it doesn't exactly smell like roses. More like rotten eggs. So unless you want to end up looking like a boiled lobster, I suggest you stay away from these waters. If you're planning a trip to Tanzania, you might want to think twice before diving into Natron Lake. Sure, it's got a beautiful reddish hue, but that's thanks to some bacteria that call this lake home. And don't even get me started on the pH levels. They're so high they might even strip the color off your swimsuit. But hey, at least the flamingos like it there. Those acid-loving birds are living their best lives in a group with 2.5 million of their closest feathered friends. How come these birds manage to thrive there, you might wonder? Well, no predators means no stress, which equals easy breeding. They also love feasting on that fancy bacteria, which makes the water all pink. You may think that Belize's Great Blue Hole is just calling out to you with its stunning blue hues and close proximity to land. But hold your flippers, because there's a catch. Sure, it's about 900 feet across and 300 feet deep, but lurking beneath the surface is a confusing patterns of tunnels filled with coral and wildlife. It's like finding your way through a maze at a theme park, but with more fish. And as if that wasn't tricky enough, the deeper you go, the fewer creatures you'll encounter. Why, you ask? Well, it turns out that there's a sneaky layer of hydrogen sulfide that covers the entire width of the hole, depriving any living creature of oxygen. Plan on heading to the Devil's Kettle waterfall in Minnesota? This one won't necessarily be dangerous for you, but you might end up losing some of your stuff out there if you don't pay attention. That's because this waterfall experiences a phenomenon that's a real head-scratcher for geologists. One part of the waterfall flows normally, while the other part disappears into a big ol' hole. And get this, not even ping pong balls can make it out. Scientists decided to investigate, and they went all out, even using GPS trackers. Initially, they couldn't figure it out until they realized that the hole acts like a giant blender. That water is getting spun around so hard, it's basically obliterating everything in its path. They finally measured the water volume and saw that it was still there, so it was supposed to come back out somewhere. The most likely explanation is that the water is probably re-emerging in the stream located beneath the waterfall. You've surely heard of the Bermuda Triangle. I mean, that's old news. But let me tell you about the Pacific's very own watery trap called the Devil's Sea. It's like a game of hide and seek, but with ships. They disappear and we can never find them again. The Kayo Maru No. 5 was on a mission to investigate a volcanic island, but the trip ended up being just one way. Add a dash of detective work to the subject and you'll find out the whole story about the Devil's Sea is more myth and less fact. But it doesn't make it any less interesting. If you're still interested in some mysterious ship disappearance, then Lake Superior is the place you'll want to read about. Even the most skilled scuba divers can't find a single piece of all those lost vessels. The main character of this lake story was a ship called the SS Edmund Fitzgerald, the biggest one to sink in the Great Lakes. To this day, people aren't sure why it sank. So, you're planning a little swim in one of the Great Lakes, huh? Well, might want to steer clear of Lake Michigan, unless you're really into extreme water sports. This bad boy has a reputation for being the most dangerous of the bunch, thanks to some sneaky undercurrents that like to snatch unsuspecting swimmers. Make sure to watch out for those pesky piers and docks that only add to the lake's swimming difficulty. If you're feeling adventurous, you might want to skip the months of October or November. This is when the temperatures start to drop and the currents get extra wild. Tibet has its dangerous lake too, and at first glance, it's gorgeous. But don't get too excited. It's got a salt content so high that nothing can survive in it. Some villagers around there actually consider it to be tainted with some sort of substance. The cherry on top? Other locals believe there's a selfish creature living in the lake who's hogging up all the space for itself. No wonder its nickname is Darkness. No list of dangerous waters is complete without Lake Victoria, the big kahuna of African lakes and the third biggest in the whole wide world. But beware, not all its waters are safe for us humans. Some regions can be real troublemakers because this lake has its own personal climate. And what does that mean? Mostly that you can't trust the weather here one bit. You could be soaking up some sweet rays one second, and the next you're running from a torrential downpour. Unless you want to be caught swimming in a storm, steer clear of this moody lake. You might have already seen pictures of Lake Hillier. It's like a giant pool of grapefruit juice in Australia. Scientists have been scratching their heads over it for centuries because they still can't figure out with certainty why it's pink. But here's the kicker, it's not the only one. Yep, there's another pink lake out there called Lake Retba. Both of these lakes have super high salt content, which is apparently a magnet for some fancy microorganisms. These little guys produce beta-carotene, you know, the substance that's in carrots. And that's what gives these lakes their groovy colors. Interested in swimming in this lake? It's not technically dangerous because the water has such high amounts of salt in it, There are no scary sea creatures to worry about. But, on the other hand, you'll need to make sure you don't accidentally take a sip. Drinking highly salted water will make you dehydrate faster than a plant in the desert.
See this big spot under the water near the shore? It's a coral reef. It beckons you to swim closer. But be careful. If you get there, it could be the last swim of your life. Stay away from the reef. But why? Why are coral reefs so dangerous? Let's figure it out. First, make your guess about what a coral reef is. An underwater cliff? Rocks? A coastal landscape? Some spot where shells live? Close, but not true. In short, a coral reef is a living thing. What we see in shallow tropical waters are colonies of organisms called coral polyps. They are distant relatives of jellyfish and anemones with amazing superpowers. They can absorb calcium from the water. When they do this, they convert calcium into hard limestone rocks. These rocks, like building blocks, form solid coral reefs and settle on the seabed. But there are soft coral reefs that look like plants. They float freely with the currents, swing in different directions, and seem to pulsate under the water. They don't have solid coral blocks, but they can grow tree-like cores to maintain their position. Both hard and soft coral reefs are beautiful creatures, but at the same time, they are very dangerous. Many ships were wrecked when they hit shallow water, as the sharp edges of coral reefs ripped through their hulls. But what danger is there for someone swimming alone, who isn't going to hit the reef? You can just scuba dive and enjoy the beautiful views of coral polyps, but be prepared to encounter unexpected and unpleasant creatures. A coral reef is not just a living colony, it's a home for thousands of diverse marine creatures. And some of them can be very dangerous for humans. Like the blue-ringed octopus, for example. This is a tiny creature that you will definitely notice thanks to the bright spots on its body, but don't touch it with your hand, as it's one of the most venomous creatures on Earth. The amount of toxic venom carried by this octopus can harm 26 people, and these people are unlikely to survive this encounter. The poison works within a few minutes, and there's no antidote in the world. What makes it even more dangerous is that the octopus's sting is painless. You probably won't even know you've been stung until the first symptoms appear: body paralysis, respiratory problems, and cardiac arrest. But even if you don't notice the octopus and swim past, you'll probably notice the box jellyfish, whose tentacles can reach several feet in length. It looks like a creature from deep space, and you better not approach it. The box jellyfish is considered the world's most venomous creature. There are special cells in their tentacles that release a toxin called nematocysts. Over the past 100 years, roughly 70 people lost their lives after encountering these jellyfish. But most likely the number is much higher. We just don't know about all such cases. Unlike the painless sting of the blue-ringed octopus, the encounter with a box jellyfish hurts. Another dangerous inhabitant of coral reefs is a rock. Yes, take a look. It's just a rock that's part of the reef. But wait a minute, it seems to be moving. Don't touch it. It's incredibly venomous. By now, you've probably already realized that this is not a stone. This is the stonefish. And this sullen-looking guy is one of the most venomous fish on the planet. Do you see those little spikes along its spine? The fish raises them when it feels in danger. If the toxin covering these spikes enters your body, you have less than an hour to take the antidote. If you don't make it in time, better not dwell on the worst-case scenario. Do you still want to swim closer to the coral reef? If so, go ahead. There are other scary creatures there. This one, for example, doesn't pretend to be a rock or something harmless. It looks dangerous, and it is dangerous. It's the moray eel. These underwater snakes are not venomous, but meeting them can be unpleasant. They can bite quite painfully, but only if you disturb them in their burrows. Of course, you probably won't want to tease these creatures, but you might accidentally approach their burrow without knowing they live there and poke it with your finger. Once you do it, get ready for a payback strike. By the way, moray eels are poisonous because they eat toxic algae and fish. However, they can't use this poison against you unless you try to eat them. As you approach the coral reef, you may encounter a flying dagger. This is the needlefish, a thin, fast fish with a sharp nose and prickly needle-like teeth. It swims near the surface close to coral reefs at high speed and then jumps out of the water and flies at a speed of 37 miles per hour. Many people have reported getting seriously injured by this guy. This one looks like barbed wire shaped like a star. Hundreds of sharp needles cover the crown of thorns starfish's body, and you'd better not touch them. Each thorn on their body contains dangerous toxins that cause pain, nausea, swelling, and can even lead to anaphylactic shock. Coral reefs are not just a place for them to hang out, but also food. This starfish bulges out its stomach, covers the reef surface with it, and absorbs nutrients from it. It's like something straight out of a sci-fi horror movie. But don't think that corals are something scary and dangerous. In fact, coral reefs are some of the most useful things in the ocean. They even save people's lives. Do you know that lines of coral reefs cushion the impact of tsunamis and protect the shores from flooding? Some large reefs, like the Great Barrier Reef, are the boundary between the open sea and shallow waters. They stretch along the coast and form a protective wall that serves as a barrier against tsunamis and landslides. During a storm, rocky coral reefs disperse large waves and soften their impacts on the shore. But the coolest thing is that corals help your Instagram profile look better. What? Yes, that's right. Do you know these beautiful paradise-style photos when the water near the shore is blue and the sand on the beach is white? So sand gets this unique color thanks to corals. As you already know, coral bodies are made up of calcium carbonate. When waves and storms destroy corals, they wash out these calcium particles directly onto the shore. Besides corals, tiny bits of crushed seashells also end up there. Over time, layer by layer, they build up to form white sandy beaches. By the way, parrotfish are also involved in creating this beauty. These little fish feed on algae that stick to coral reefs, so they also consume pieces of coral along with their food. Then, when they're full, they release the coral particles, which eventually become the white sand. One such fish releases about 200 pounds of coral waste per year. So in a sense, this white sand appears because parrotfish go number 2. Coral reefs are ancient. The average reef grows at a rate of about 0.7 inches per year. And now look at their sizes. The Great Barrier Reef stretches for more than 1,430 miles, and it's been growing for 8,000 years. It's been here since people began to develop agriculture, domesticate animals, and build the first settlements. And some reefs are much, much older. That's why it's so important to preserve this unique natural wonder. And humans end up destroying it, often when ships accidentally crash into coral reefs. When this happens, it ruins the home for thousands of sea creatures. Ocean ecosystems get majorly impacted. But we also try to improve the situation. Coast guards protect the areas where coral reefs grow so that no vessel can approach them. These majestic creatures are a crucial part of nature, and this is another equally important reason why we should stay away from them.
A strange lake appeared in India 52,000 years ago. It was formed here literally out of nowhere. I recall it was a Wednesday. Anyway, for tens of thousands of years, people came up with various scary stories about the lake. Some locals believe this place was cursed. Others think that the lake's bottom hides the gateway to the underworld. But those are all legends. The real reason for the appearance of this Lonar Lake is even more surprising. At first, scientists were sure that the lake was an ancient crater of a long-extinct volcano. It's in a balsam field made of 65-million-year-old volcanic rock. But then, geologists conducted a detailed analysis of the soil and water. and found that Lonar Lake had a space origin. Geologists found a unique glass inside the lake that forms only with a strong impact and energy release. 52,000 years ago, a huge meteorite weighing 2 million tons fell into this place. It was almost 6 times heavier than the Empire State Building. The striking power was so high that the volcanic rock melted and turned into glass. Perhaps the bottom of this lake still contains particles of this giant meteorite that flew to us from the distant space depths. Okay, we have a lake created by a space object more than 50,000 years ago. But even this is not the strangest thing about it. In 2020, the locals noticed that Lonar Lake had turned pink. In just a few days, the salt water mysteriously changed its color. Biologists and geologists immediately took water samples to the Scientific Research Center. The detailed analysis showed that the water contained an increased level of unique microbes. They accumulate on the surface and emit some pink pigment. Soon these microbes settled to the bottom, and the lake became transparent again. Also, rains help the water go back to its usual appearance. These microbes color the lake and make the pink plumage of flamingos even brighter. The birds get food from the Lonar Lake and absorb these pink bacteria. Now, Lonar Lake is a popular place among tourists, but this is not the only thing that may surprise you in India. Our next stop is a small village with about 2,600 people located in a hot rainforest. The locals are very hospitable. They welcome not only tourists, but also one of the most venomous reptiles on the planet. King cobras are crawling in almost every house in this village. Locals are happy to see them as if they were their pets. People share water and food with these animals. They even give the reptiles a special corner where they can relax from the scorching sun. Cobras crawl in houses, schools, and even on the streets. Humans and reptiles are used to each other and feel safe. There has never been a case of a cobra attack in the village. It's the only place in the world where these venomous reptiles live in such harmony with people. Now, imagine a town that consists of many little united villages. The residents are all engaged in agriculture. They know how to extract water from ground rocks, and they bargain well. The town has been thriving for several centuries, and people live happily in it. Then, one day, everything changes. All the residents quickly pack up their stuff and run away from their homes. Overnight, the town becomes abandoned. It is a real story that happened in the state of Rajasthan in 1825. And still, no one knows why the people disappeared from there. The most popular version says that the cruel local ruler collected large taxes from the locals. Then he fell in love with the daughter of the chief of this town and threatened that he would collect extra taxes if the girl refused to be his wife. Citizens decided to support the woman and her father and left their homes in one day. This town is still empty, but the locals from the nearest cities are afraid to approach. Our next stop is the state of Maharashtra. There's a small village there with very positive people. They go to stores, cafes, schools, and banks. Everything here seems quite ordinary, and you wouldn't notice what's so special about this place. But just wait for the night to come. People go to sleep and no one locks their houses. There are no locks at all in this village. The door of any building is always open here. The owners leave the shops, cafes, and libraries open. When locals go to work, they don't lock up their homes either. They don't hide money and jewelry. The reason for this is the complete absence of thefts. The villagers are sure that anyone can get into serious trouble for stealing. According to a legend, about 300 years ago, after prolonged rains and floods, a large black stone slab appeared in the center of the village. This slab symbolized an Indian mythical creature that watched over the locals. At some point, people stopped locking their houses because they knew that no one would dare to commit theft in that creature's face. In 2015, a police station was opened here, but almost no one has reported an incident since then. The building doesn't even have doors because the police don't keep anyone there. Another fantastic place in India is a village in the state of Assam. Hundreds of locals prepare here for an unusual celebration every now and then. They arrange a magnificent wedding ceremony. They set the table, dress up in beautiful costumes, and bring gifts. And all this for the newlyweds. But instead of people, frogs get married here. Locals hold weddings for wild frogs to summon rain. The incredible thing is that the ceremony looks just like a real wedding. The fun can last all day until late at night. Now, there's one dangerous and inaccessible island in India. You can find it in the Bay of Bengal. It's called the North Sentinel. It's a small piece of land that looks like a tropical paradise. But you won't be able to get there. Since 1956, nobody can travel to this place. The Coast Guard is always sailing around and patrolling the area. The reason for this is the local Sentinelese tribe. This tribe lives isolated from the whole world. They don't know about modern technologies, the internet, or television. For centuries, the Sentinelese have lived on their own, away from civilization. And the people from India want to keep it that way. Anyone who approaches their island is welcomed by the tribe with a flurry of spears and arrows. And it doesn't matter if you're coming by boat or helicopter. Another reason why you can't get on the island is the Sentinelese immune system. The Coast Guard is trying to protect the local tribe from possible diseases and infections that outsiders can bring with them. The locals have no immunity from the flu or even a simple cold. They don't know what that is. Also, there are coral reefs and limestone around the island, which significantly complicates the passage of large ships. Despite all the prohibitions, many people tried to get to the island. In 1880, one officer accidentally discovered this island. He went ashore and found a noble soil ideal for growing coconut palms. The officer also noticed several huts on the island, but didn't dare meet the locals. Explorers and travelers presented the islanders with fish as a gift many times. The locals accepted it, asked for more, but still didn't let them approach their houses. It was also challenging to make friends with the tribe because they communicate in one of the most difficult languages to learn in the world. Scientists and linguists have been studying this language for decades. At the end of the 20th century, outsiders made some progress in building a connection with the tribe. In 1991, a team of anthropologists invited the islanders aboard a large ship. They gave bags of coconuts to tribe members. This may be where the phrase "left holding the bag" came from. Or not. Otherwise, let's just leave these folks alone, shall we?